Gentili telespettatori, benvenuti a Panorama Italiano. Nel programma di oggi vi riportiamo un servizio sul banchetto e raccolta fondi che è stato fatto dall'Italian Canadian Handicapable Association e poi vi riporterò un documentario sugli internati italiani della Seconda Guerra Mondiale. In questi giorni sui giornali Corriere Canadese eccetera sono apparsi ancora articoli inerenti appunto a questo caso e la ricompensa, il risarcimento che è stato chiesto dalla comunità italiana al governo canadese per queste persone che sono state internate nel 1940. Riporta appunto questo fatto per il risarcimento, morale che il governo canadese deve alla comunità italiana, che potrebbe essere usato in parecchi modi per mantenere e sviluppare la cultura italiana e la presenza italiana qui in Canada. Prima di passare al programma, comunque, gentili telespettatori, volevo ricordarvi che il 4 di agosto, domenica prossima, c'è la festa di Santo Ippolito al Focolare Furlan. La settimana scorsa ho avuto un'intervista con Massimo Ciampa, un ragazzo molto, entusiasta e volontario appunto del comitato di Santo Ippolito. Hanno organizzato una bella festa con tante manifestazioni sia per i bambini e anche per gli adulti, quindi partecipate alla festa di Santo Ippolito domenica prossima, il 4 di agosto, al Focolare Furlan. Inoltre, gentili telespettatori, il 10 e 11 di agosto ci sarà la Sagra della Sant'Angela. Come ho detto molte volte, continuo a ripetere, la Sagra della Sant'Angela è la festa della comunità italiana. Noi tutti italiani dovremmo partecipare a questo evento e far sì che questo evento sia uno dei più importanti della comunità italiana. Come sapete, avete sentito, la Sant'Angela ha bisogno di aiuto, quindi partecipando alla festa si può dare quel supporto morale alle persone che dovrebbero in un certo senso curare gli interessi della Sant'Angela stessa. La reputazione della Sant'Angela è la reputazione degli italiani tutti, quindi mettiamoci insieme e cerchiamo di fare il nostro meglio per far sì che la comunità italiana mantenga la sua reputazione sempre alta nella comunità in cui viviamo. Ed ora, gentili telespettatori, passiamo al nostro programma. Ci risentiamo tra poco. Ed ora, gentili telespettatori, vi riporto un servizio sul banchetto raccolta fondi, il 20° banchetto raccolta fondi della Italian Canadian Handicapable Association, che si è avuto al Italiano Club alcune settimane fa. Purtroppo, per un errore nel mio computer, ho perso il contenuto del filmato che ho fatto in quella serata e quindi devo ringraziare veramente Mario Benvenuto, che mi ha fornito le seguenti foto per fare appunto questo servizio. Come sapete, Mario Benvenuto è un volontario della Italian Canadian Handicapable Association, è un direttore ed è stato involto come volontario per tanti anni facendo delle bellissime foto. Ti ringrazio, Mario, della tua cortesia nell'offrirmi queste bellissime foto, così posso far vedere almeno alle persone come è stata la serata del 12 di luglio scorso al Italiano Club. Come vedete c'è stata una grande folla, molte persone, più di 600 persone, ed è stata la prima volta che hanno raggiunto questo numero di persone. Tutto il banchetto, l'evento è organizzato da un comitato di 18 persone che sono tutti volontari e lavorano 3 mesi fisso all'anno per far sì che questo banchetto abbia il successo dovuto. Il successo di questo banchetto è nella raccolta fondi e nei soldi che loro ricevono dalle persone, non solo per la vendita dei biglietti, ma per i tantissimi regali che loro offrono ai presenti. Ci sono molti regali che sono offerti da tante persone, e in più hanno anche dei regali ai quali bisogna mettere il prezzo più alto per averlo. E ci sono stati dei bellissimi regali. E come ho detto, ci lavorano per 3 mesi e alcune persone si distinguono nel far sì che si possano avere tanti di quei regali, appunto per far sì che le persone abbiano una scelta abbastanza varia e cose molto interessanti, come vedete dalla partecipazione delle persone, far sì che possano l'organizzazione, la Italian Canadian Handicap Association, può raccogliere più soldi possibili. Il tutto, gentili telespettatori, è coordinato da Nino Medoro, che vediamo qui con il presidente, e aiutato da tanti volontari che vediamo qui nelle varie foto, che contribuiscono appunto al successo di questo banchetto. È una cosa molto caratteristica e da lodare. Vediamo qui per esempio i vincitori della chiave. Ci sono in vendita 100 chiavi, solo 2 possono aprire la serratura, quindi ci sono 2 premi, e qui vediamo il primo premio, i vincitori del primo premio, e vediamo anche il vincitore del secondo premio. È un modo di raccogliere soldi e come in questo evento il fattore principale è dare un aiuto a far sì che la Italian Canadian Handicap Association abbia abbastanza fondi per fare i programmi che fanno per i tantissimi assistiti che loro hanno e che hanno assistito per tanti anni. E parlando di assistenza, parlando di associazione, la Italian Canadian Handicap Association ha una reputazione ottima nella comunità per i programmi che offre a tutti coloro che sono disabili. Non fa differenza l'età, le persone disabili di ogni età possono ricevere appunto aiuti nei programmi che la Italian Canadian Handicap Association ha volta per volta, e questa dà molta credibilità. Infatti alcuni giorni fa, parlando con un uomo di successo negli affari, mi diceva appunto che la sua associazione preferita per donare dei fondi per aiutarli era appunto la Italian Canadian Handicap Association, per la loro per il loro lavoro, e essendo locale e vedendo i risultati positivi che questa associazione dà aiutando le persone, come vi avete visto alcune settimane fa, per esempio con il Fishing Derby, la gara di pesca che si fa ogni anno e che hanno una partecipazione di tanta gente. Quindi questo è stato il banchetto della Italian Canadian Handicap Association. Inoltre, durante la serata poi sono state riconosciute alcune persone, tra quali me stesso, che vedete qui nella foto con il presidente Laurie Sanson, che mi ha consegnato appunto la placca della Hall of Fame del Italian Canadian Handicap Association, che è diciamo situata al Nuvolette Rosati Complex. Ed è stato riconosciuto anche un giovane, Evan Rock, per una borsa di studio di David Rossi. Al banchetto poi hanno partecipato tante persone e tra gli altri il fondatore Egidio Nevolletto con il figlio, vediamo nella foto, come pure uno dei più grandi contributori al Nuvolette Rosati Complex, Vincenzo Rosati. E infine, gentili telespettatori, ancora una volta voglio ringraziare Mario Benvenuto per avermi fornito le foto per fare questo servizio. Ed ora, dopo un po' di pubblicità, passiamo al programma degli internati di Petawawa. Arrivederci, a tra poco. Gentili telespettatori, grazie per averci seguito nel nostro programma. Ancora una volta voglio ringraziare Mario Benvenuto per la cortesia di avermi dato le foto, per cui ho potuto fare un servizio sulla serata della Italian Canadian Handicap Association, la serata di raccolta fondi al Cicero Club. E faccio tanti auguri al comitato della Italian Canadian Handicap Association per il successo che hanno avuto e li ringrazio per il riconoscimento che mi hanno conferito quella sera e voglio appunto testimoniare.
No one can sleep without wives, without the touch of lovers. The moon, an empty plate, is claimed by every man in this forgotten moment. Secrets of the heart whispered to this lone Luna. Messages sent across kilometers, across cities of war, sealed in silent, starlight kisses.
At 1 o'clock, the radio came on, and the agent there that Italy had gone into war. They picked up the men to take them to camp. There was Mr. Orlando, Mr. Brenger, Mr. Maggi, Father Ricardo.
When the War Measure Act went into effect June 10th, there was total chaos. Shoe shops over here, they were all prejudiced against, broken into, windows broken. They didn't do anything wrong.
I came home from school and the house was loaded with RCMP and local police. They tore the place apart.
Everything was vandalized. There was a great deal of animosity toward the Italians. They were all a bunch of wops. They were all a bunch of fascists.
He was picked up by the RCMP and handcuffed and dragged out without any explanation. And we didn't see him for about 2 to 3 years.
Mrs. Orlando called me and said, Antonietta, they took my boys and I don't know where.
He was jumping up and down against the windows, trying to spot his father in the group inside. He was 11 years old at the time, and it was surrounded by guards with rifles.
That's right.
And one of the soldiers took his rifle butt and knocked him for a loop.
Father Ricardo has never forgiven the authorities for. He was stripped of his habit completely and made to walk around in his BVDs, his underwear, in front of all these people who were his parishioners. Took his habit off him. Very humiliating.
When I came back from school on the day that my dad was arrested, I didn't realize what was happening. Then my comadre across the street had taken me and bought some ice cream for me, and I remember crying into the ice cream. It was a strange day.
With Italy's declaration of war against the Allied forces on June 10, 1940, many Canadians of Italian origin were declared enemy aliens. Thousands of men and women across Canada were required to report to the RCMP, although no charges were ever laid against any one of them. Approximately 630 Italian Canadians had to report to internment camps in Petawawa and in Gagetown, New Brunswick.
Virtually every Canadian of Italian origin was deemed an enemy alien, and they were required to report to police stations and be fingerprinted and accounted for, which apparently they did great droves because they felt it was their civic responsibility to do that.
There were 3 items that were taboo. One was a picture of Benito Mussolini. Yeah. The third was a Italian flag, and the third most condemning, a gun of any sort. With those 3 items in a house, or any variation of it, they took that man immediately.
A lot of chimneys were spewing out smoke, which was strange, but they were burning calendars and things like that that they felt could incriminate them. And this became a joke later about the chimneys going in the middle of June.
We have evidence, for instance, that the police broke into a bedroom, found a crucifix, thought this was some kind of nefarious symbol, and the person was sent to internment camp.
My dad was very disappointed about the alliance with Germany. He was an admirer of Mussolini, and he wasn't alone, as you know. There was Churchill and Roosevelt, Mahatma Gandhi, and a good number of people. So it's not surprising that many Italians were also admiring him.
Montreal was very sympathetic to anything that Mussolini did. I mean, they had his main pilot come over and have air shows, and then the mayor was supposed to be a fascistic, I guess it was Chameleon Hood at that time, and it was amazing.
Well, he was in the internment camp.
He was into the mayor of Montreal. Mm-hmm.
And, you have the Notre Dame de la Defense church in the Little Italy area of Montreal with the huge picture of Mussolini on the horse.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question there will be some that were committed fascists and understood the political sense of the word, but the vast majority of folks were unaware of it as a political movement as such. Some may even have signed a membership, but to them, Mussolini represented not fascism, not a political movement per se, but a recognition of their own roots.
Stalin was a bad man. Later on, maybe Stalin's a good man. In the 50s, he's a bad man. So from that, it started me thinking, well, the government's telling me who's bad, who's good, and when I should think they're bad, and when I should think they're good. Well, I'll make up my own mind.
In 1934, Tony and my grandfather were both mailed directly from the Italian consular fascist membership cards with their names already on it. My grandfather completely ignored it.
The church was our community center. We didn't have a community center in Ottawa like some bigger cities, Montreal and Toronto, but the church was the community center. And then somehow or other, fascism came into the church. So we all joined in. We didn't have a Boy Scouts unit. We had great fun. We went to summer camp.
When the fascists were trying to set up groups in local communities, that was in the late 20s and early 30s when Italy and Britain were on good terms. And the fascists were never considered to be subversive or dangerous. That all changed in an instant when Italy declared, its alliance with Hitler. So it went from being a non-threatening organization to being a threat overnight.
Right after my 18th birthday, I was conscripted, and when I went to when I reported to the Selective Service Office, I was given three choices. I had a choice to go into the Army or go work at the rubber plant in Sarnia, and if I refused, he says, I'll pick up the phone, I'll call the RCMP, and you're going to the concentration camp in Petawawa. So that shook me up pretty good. And there were three other fellows with me at the time. We all had the same choices.
These people were jailed. That's what internment means. There was never any due process. Nobody was ever charged.
A murderer and a thief at that time had a right to a trial, a lawyer, a trial, and everything else. These guys didn't.
Che freddo, freddo cane. Così duro, ma me lo voglio scordare. Dove l'amore caro, l'abbraccio di mia moglie. Se gelato e non si scioglie. Le preghiere di speranza perse in questa stanza mi ricordano mia moglie, ma il cuore non si scioglie.
The worst part of that period was the fact, the loss of income for the poor families.
What made it rough is a woman with, in my case, 4 children, and there's no income.
They were living in a garage through the winter, and only the third child suffered very badly with pneumonia and other things and was taken to an orphanage or somewhere, taken from my mother.
The names of enemy aliens were readily available to anyone. And in fact, in some instances, they were on telephone poles, much like we used to have the electoral list on telephone phones, if you remember. So you could actually go and see if your neighbor was on an enemy alien list.
I couldn't seem to get a job anywhere because I was Italian. Wherever I went, there was no way at all. So finally I went to on Adelaide Street, they were doing uniforms. And I went and asked them for a job. And Mr. Gisberg asked me my name. And I said, what difference does it make what my name is? I'm willing to do the work. If I can't do the work, then you let me go. But I'll work 1 week for nothing. And if I do my job, then you keep me, I want to be paid.
My mother had to get a job in a bakery for $8 a week, which was not very much even then. I remember on her deathbed seeing her arms with the scars from the bakery, the burns. I realized what she had gone through for us.
We used to get letters from my dad, but there were mostly little square cutouts here and there in the letter, censored. Whatever he was trying to tell us, we'll never know.
My father received a letter from, I believe, the Minister of Justice, saying that he would be allowed to write to his father at the following address, but there were certain things he wasn't allowed to talk about, in particular business matters. That his letters had to be brief and they couldn't be too frequent.
Caro figlio, ho ricevuto la tua da Ottawa e spero che il tuo viaggio abbia avuto i suoi frutti. 8 months are hard and long, and to wait a month or a year. You know what this means to find ourselves in this situation, and knowing not to have done anything bad to this country. I'm not sorry, but God bless them. All the good deeds done by us. Have they been completely forgotten? Here we are all fine, except the terrible monotony that gets to your nerve and sometimes is insufferable. A te, Loretta e bambini. Vi penso affettuosamente. Leo.
If you happen to take an Italian course at the Italian consulate, for instance, you might automatically be suspect. All the heads of organizations in the Italian community, those names were sold. So we know that happened. Who actually did it and how much they were paid, people will differ on, but clearly it did happen.
The mother was approached by Bersani, something of that sort. And he would approach people and ask, I'll help you get a man out if you do this or if you do that. And one of the things they asked my mom was to sign a paper that would implicate the apostolic delegate, Antonucci at the time, and say that my dad was getting orders from him and they would release my dad then if she signed it. And of course she said he could stay there all his life. I will never do a thing like that. And mother asked the judge, one of the judges, why would you use a man like that? And the answer was, we use a dirty broom to clean the stable.
I go to this building, I can remember it like yesterday, and this politician, instead of meeting in his office, met us in the elevator of the building. And he says, I know all about this case. Tell this woman that I'm leaving for Ottawa, and her husband, because of what he was just incarcerated by accident, he'll be released very shortly. But I have to be paid for my work, and he wanted $500. Now, $500 in 1940, for $900 you bought a house.
My dad was approached the same way. He required money to pay this well-known politician, which we will not mention. And he did not have the money or the forthwith to pay him. My uncles did.
Uniamoci un bel giorno. Nell'aria di mattina libera intorno. Che non ci scordiamo mai l'amore. Perché fuga la speranza, si scioglie sempre il cuore. Sempre il cuore. Sempre il cuore.
One of the few women that was interned, and she was in her garden bathing her 4-year-old in one of those aluminum bathtubs that they used to have, to hang the wash on. Police officers came in, swooped her away, leaving her child in the water screaming. And I was on a radio show recounting this story, only to hear the 4-year-old boy, now grown up, who called in and said, "That was my mother, and let me tell you about it." So many stories that just tore at your heart. This woman had been taken to Kingston Penitentiary because there were no facilities for women at Petawawa, and her son didn't see her for 18 months.
My brother Silvio visited Petawawa, and it was Dad's birthday, July the 1st, which he always claimed was for both Canada and him. He would wrap himself with the Canadian flag, and in the morning I would see him with the Canadian flag. And my brother brought a cake, a birthday cake, and the guard threw it down on the floor, and my brother was a little upset about it. And said, to be fair to the guards, so there were some very nice ones and some not. And I remember my mom asking the guard if she could kiss him, because you're not allowed to touch that prisoner, and he turned his back and let her kiss him, which was very touching too.
There were friends of my dad's, friends in the neighborhood that were interred. It seemed to be doctors and lawyers and people like that, because they had been involved in the community, signing papers for others, bringing people from overseas.
And the impact of interning a doctor is a great deal more, it's a great deal stronger than the impact of interning a bricklayer or a maintenance man.
I'm confident that in the Italian community, if we could get the leaders, then the rest could go their way, performing their ordinary work. I think you will find, especially among the Italian societies, that many have hooked up with these organizations as a social obligation, with an eye to business, to be in with the crowd, as far as persons of their own nationality are concerned, or for some such reason. You must remember that tremendous pressure has been brought to bear from Rome. In other words, a large majority of these persons are sheep. And if we could segregate the leaders, the remainder would tend to be loyal Canadians. Norman Robertson, advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada.
One of the internees who was a top chef at the Chateau Laurier Hotel, and his name was Mr. Scarabelli. He was able to get his job back at the Chateau Laurier Hotel, and there was a state dinner when when Winston Churchill came here in 1943. And I guess the dinner was so very good, and he asked to speak to the chef. And this Mr. Scarabelli came out, and he was introduced to Winston Churchill. And, you know, the innuendo was that this was a lovely meal. You must have been cooking for a long period of time. You must have been employed here for a long period of time. And he said, yes, I was employed, but I was also interned upon the orders of the British and the Canadian government, sir. And apparently Churchill was just aghast, but, you know, being very diplomatic, hid that.
This is my family. Here's my eldest brother, Bill, Guglielmo. Never called him that, Bill. My mother, Antonietta. Bill, by the way, had joined the army by this time. My father had been out of camp probably 6 or 7 months, and he joined the Navy. Presumably he was still an enemy alien. And that's me. I was I think I turned 16. Yeah, of course I did. I was 16, hadn't turned 17. I was in the Navy. 1 month later, I was in Halifax. A month after that, I was in convoy on the destroyer, the St. Clair.
There were 2 people who were interned who lost sons in the war while they were interned.
Yes, one was the Rainoni family. His son was killed on the invasion of Anzio Beach.
Right.
He was fighting for the Canadian Army, and his father was in the camp.
2 weeks, we lost 3 of the boys, just on Manning Avenue, on Claremont, and up on Gore Street. Those 3, and they were boys that we knew all together, that we used to always be together. They all joined. All of them joined. They weren't not drafted, they were joined. They joined the service to fight for this country.
It is the worst of what happens to the human condition. And the tragedies that occur when that happens are just irreparable.
Well, there isn't anything you could do because under the War Measures Act, we didn't have too many rights or reason to complain. That's how we saw it.
No one is questioning the right of the government to promulgate laws that say we've got to keep our citizen state from terrorist threats or from political threats or fascist threats in this particular case. You do suspend people's civil rights for a period of time. But when you suspend it unilaterally for a long period of time, you're no longer a democracy, you're a totalitarian state.
The day of liberty lost is never recovered. It's never recovered. It's a day out of your life that is gone. And so it's precious. It is so precious. Forget about the money, forget about property, forget about title, forget about all of these other kinds of things that aren't that significant in the total picture of what's important in life.
Compensation, I mean, how much can they get to compensate the number of days and hours away from their family? You can never compensate that.
My brother, Silvio, died as a result of a car train accident at age 21. So those 3 years were removed from my brother with my father and vice versa. I felt they were cheated. That bothered me very much.
And history should not be in any way compromised. We shouldn't sweep the unfortunate, the tragic, the distasteful occurrences of our past.
I remember in Montreal, we were having a hearing, and this young woman was sitting in the audience. She would have been 18, 19, something like that. And she sat and she saw for the first time the list of internees that the RCP had produced that had been in Petawawa. And she saw her grandfather's name on it. And she stood up in absolute tears. She said, you know, I have dinner with him every Sunday. He's never spoken to me about this. How could this have happened in this country?
It was just a bad page in history. And like I say, from what I gather, most of the Italians who I met wanted to go on with their lives and hope and pray it never happens again.
I was so discouraged, but my mother used to always say, Via me non fa così, va bene scorde fa male pense. Do good and forget it, do evil and remember. 6.5 years in Italy, 88 years here in Canada. My roots are in Italy, and it's always been where you were born, but my heart and my whole life is Canada.
hai piegate le stanche spalle, ma forte tieni in mano il tuo bastone, che come una bandiera nel vento si alzerà, ed un cannone ancora risuonerà. Tra queste cime che tanto hai amato, torni ragazzo in mezzo alla vallata, commosso stringi a te quel tuo nipote che saluta con la mano guardandomi nel blu. Porti un cappello e una penna nera, ti rivedo mio vecchio alpino. Porti a casa un ricordo, lasciando qui il tuo cuore, quel tuo nome, la brigata di Avango. Porti a casa un ricordo, lasciando qui il tuo cuore, quando combattevi per il tricolore. Porti a casa un ricordo, lasciando qui il tuo cuore, quel tuo nome, la brigata di Avango. Porti a casa un ricordo, lasciando qui il tuo cuore, quando combattevi per il tricolore.
Gentili telespettatori, grazie per averci seguito nel nostro programma. Ancora una volta voglio ringraziare Mario Benvenuto per la cortesia di avermi dato le foto, per cui ho potuto fare un servizio sulla serata della Italian Canadian Handicap Association, la serata di raccolta fondi al Cicero Club. E faccio tanti auguri al comitato della Italian Canadian Handicap Association per il successo che hanno avuto, e li ringrazio per il riconoscimento che mi hanno conferito quella sera, e voglio appunto testimoniare che una delle associazioni più genuine che noi abbiamo nella comunità è appunto l'Italian Canadian Handicap Association, che aiuta tutti coloro che hanno bisogno di aiuto e sono finanziati interamente dalla comunità. Dopo di questo, gentili telespettatori, voglio ancora una volta ricordarvi di partecipare al picnic di Sant'Ippolito che sarà al Focolare Furlan il 4 di agosto prossimo. Gli organizzatori, per la maggioranza giovani, hanno organizzato una bella festa con tante attività, con cibo eccetera, ed è una riunione di famiglia, molti intrattenimento appunto per i bambini. Quindi attendetevi a questo picnic con i vostri bambini, con le vostre famiglie, e sono sicuro che vi divertirete. Quindi il picnic di Sant'Ippolito, la festa di Sant'Ippolito al Focolare Furlan il 4 di agosto prossimo. E la settimana dopo, il 10 e l'11 di agosto, poi ci sarà la sagra della Sant'Angela. E questa è la festa della comunità italiana, l'ho detto tante volte e continuo a ripeterlo, poiché dalla maniera come questa festa viene fatta e dalla nostra partecipazione ha a che fare molto con la reputazione stessa della comunità italiana. Quindi cerchiamo di partecipare tutti a questa festa, specie in questo momento di bisogno, e incoraggiare le persone che sono involte a far sì che possano fare del loro meglio e far sì che la nostra reputazione, la reputazione della comunità italiana sia mantenuta sempre alta, e incoraggiare i giovani che sono involti nel mantenere la nostra cultura e religione. E con questo, gentili telespettatori, vi saluto e vi ricordo ancora una volta: coloro che vogliono far sapere alla comunità degli eventi, delle loro sezioni, Globis eccetera, possono sempre chiamarmi al 980-1351 oppure 972-1355 oppure mandare una email a Panorama Italiano @contatti.sie, e sarò molto ben lieto di far sì che la comunità sia al corrente dell'attività delle loro associazioni, club, eccetera. Vi ringrazio di avermi seguito e arrivederci alla settimana prossima. Ciao.